Look, us Canadians don't ask for much. Just don't take our sacred charms and we won't dismember you. Use your limbs as a golf club and your eyes as a golf ball. That was really graphic, detailed, and specific. Here are my immediate thoughts on In a Violent Nature. Finally, just in time for Halloween, In a Violent Nature is a Canadian experimental slasher film written and directed by Chris Nash, and this movie has been getting so much buzz since it was unleashed on the world at Sundance earlier this year. Described as an ambient slasher, In a Violent Nature follows a new killer who is accidentally resurrected from his grave in the Ontario wilderness by a group of teenagers whom he then begins stalking and murdering. The events depicted are largely observed from the killer's perspective. So when I first heard about this, I was really excited. I love me some slashers, and the gimmick of this being shown from the point of view of the killer's perspective was certainly promising. And Chris Nash definitely knows his slashers and looked at deconstructing the slasher genre by moving the action away from all the familiar tropes that we as horror hounds are familiar with. Instead of spending all this time with unlikable characters who are just going to smoke, drink, and have sex, we follow Johnny, who is resurrected when one of the teenagers steals a locket from his resting place, awakening him to kick off some righteous carnage and vengeance. Because of this, the film is very dependent on mood and atmosphere. The film primarily takes place all outdoors as we follow Johnny as he walks and stalks his way through the northern Ontario woods. And the film takes advantage of that open space cinematography and editing, not really to get into Johnny's head, because as a slasher villain, he is pretty straightforward in his goal, but we get an understanding of his unrelenting nature. Johnny is basically a Terminator, and he will not stop until he gets what belongs to him. And whoever is in his way is going to get it bad. And that is the one thing about this movie that I have to commend. The kills in this film are off the chart. There is one kill that has to do with a head, 2 hooks, and a torso, which is unlike any kill I have ever seen in any horror movie, and I just had to applaud the effort. The film does have its own lore. It's simple and not very deep, but deep really isn't the goal of this kind of experimental film. We're able to follow along the story when we sort of half hear the mythology from our teenagers at a campsite and from a park ranger who provides some exposition as well. He is someone who has fought Johnny in the past. And that is really the strength and the weakness of this film. So we don't know any of the teenagers. We don't know the park ranger. Like I said, we follow Johnny throughout the whole thing. All the exposition is sort of half heard, half seen. We follow Johnny as he's sort of stalking behind the bushes and everything like that. But because the movie is sort of half seen and half heard from the killer's perspective, we don't get a whole lot in the way of story. So this film is really 90% gimmick. I will say though, for the majority of that time, that gimmick really does work. It is interesting to watch a movie following a silent serial killer who just walks and stalks in the woods, and it seems like a movie like that would be boring. But what Chris Nash is able to do is play with those tropes of the slasher genre. Things that we would expect to see or things that we would expect to hear certain characters do or say. We sort of see it, but again, it's sort of out of the frame or sort of half heard. So we that know the slasher genre are able to still follow along with what's going on. But here's the thing. If you are not a horror fan and don't know a lot of the tropes of the horror genre, you may get a little lost. Also, while it is nice that we don't have to spend a whole lot of time with the teenagers and, kind of go over those same slasher tropes, I did wish that we did spend a little bit more time with the Ranger and got a little bit more of his backstory. It does seem like if we're gonna go by the lore of this movie and we're kind of going by, well, what part of the story we're in, I would say, according to the Park Ranger, we're probably in the second or third sequel of this story. Now that's just for me as someone who's a filmmaker and a film critic. I'm looking for certain story elements, certain plot and beat elements. But if you are just here for mood, atmosphere, and kills, In a Violent Nature is going to give you everything you want. Overall, In a Violent Nature is just a fun time with a new twist on the slasher genre. The film has its moments where it may just be a man trekking in the woods, but Chris Nash is able to keep the pace moving and still tell a very compelling tale with a bare-bones mythology. The kills are great, and I appreciate skipping getting to know those who are going to die anyway. But I do wish at times the film did just a little bit more to establish Johnny's antagonist. And yes, if you can't stand to see someone walking for a good chunk of the film, you may find it boring, and that is fair. This is an experiment similar to a film like Skinamarink, and I believe that this film succeeded more than it failed. In a Violent Nature is a super hit for me. It's always great when we get a new slasher, but it's even better when we get a really good Canadian one. This is a film that I'm going to put up with my collection with Black Christmas as a great Canadian slasher film. But what did you think of In a Violent Nature? Share your thoughts, leave your comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can get notifications as well. Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.